Where all the Dragon Masters eat. Burger King, where all Dragon Masters eat.
Kris just quoted Triumph, what is it? What do they call
dog
him? The
or comic
insult
insult
dog
dog
from Conan. He is amazing. Check it out. Kris, I want to talk to you today about ownership.
The birds and the bees of ownership.
The birds and the bees of ownership.
Okay.
And ownership takes a lot of different forms. So let's start with the hard and fast and then move to the more nebulous.
Now, are you a little more metaphorical? Like, you got to be an accountable human being in life? Or are we talking about assets? Do you want to own that or do you want to rent that?
My answer is yes. But let's start with the hard assets. Own or rent?
Okay. My goal is to own nothing. My ultimate goal is to own nothing. There is such a cost of ownership, and there is a place for ownership. But I want everyone to understand, if you don't have to own it, don't. Think about it this way. We like going to the lake. There are really nice boats to rent at the lake. I'm going to use it 2 times this summer. So I'm going to go. I'm going to write a check. No one does that anymore. I'm going to push my
I'm going to metaphorically write a check.
Right. And then I'm going to enjoy the boat. And then I'm going to turn it back in when I'm done, probably after I've abused it, beaten it up, maybe went where I wasn't supposed to, raked it over the coals. You never want to rent me that boat. I'm going to turn that boat in at the end of the day. I'll have paid a premium. And that right there is way cheaper. Paying massive high rent is way cheaper than the cost of owning a boat if you're only going to use it 2 times. And so there are things that I do like to own, but these are things that I take ownership of. These are things that I like having around. These are things that I use so regularly that I'm okay handling or paying someone to take care of the maintenance. If you haven't been able to tell, my lifestyle, I look at every decision I make this way. What is the thing I do with my time that pays me the most money? Let's say that it's $200,000 an hour. And let's say the next thing is $50,000 an hour. And let's say the next thing is $10,000 an hour. And let's say the next thing is $5,000 an hour. And let's say the next thing is $1,000 an hour. Do you know what it costs to have someone pick up your boat and drop it off for you? Dude, they might charge you a couple $100. Or I want to service the boat and I have to scrape off the barnacles or whatever. It might cost you $500 to pay somebody to do that. Anytime in life you can save money by paying someone else to do something that is less than what you make, you are making a superior financial choice because you're creating a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum. You're saying, I am reclaiming my time. And if you have a standard on only filling it with things that make you more money, those things will find a way to come into your life and you'll always make more and pay someone else to handle. So that's why I don't want to own crap a lot of the time. So I own my Can-Am, but I pay someone to service it. I own the vehicles that I drive. I haven't paid off, but that's because I could use them at any point during the 24-hour period of time. I own the house that I live in. It's a multi-million-dollar estate because I don't want anyone messing with that because that's going to be a legacy piece I'm likely going to have for a really long period of time. But outside of that, my goal is to own as little as possible.
So you brought up a bunch of questions in my mind. First off, so Kris, does this mean you don't mow your own lawn?
Of course I don't mow my own lawn. Do you know how hard it was for me to convince my wife to pay for someone to make meals in her house? One, because she sucked at it. She wouldn't put the time and effort in it. The meals were like half made. It's like, hi, I've assembled these 3 things that I got from the store. I'm like, it's more like 3 snacks that you're kind of trying to pass as a meal, right? They weren't nutrient dense enough for me. So I said, honey, I love you. I love you. I love you. But if we're going to go to our next level, please don't feel bad. I know that your mommy instinct, mama bear, 4 kids, you don't want this thing taken away from you, but you're not that good at it. Let me just love on you by having an expert come in our house and prepare our meals. You do breakfast. That one's pretty simple. But, the rest of the meals, let's bring someone in. It's not because we're brats. It's because I want to freaking live to be 140 years old and I want my freaking kale, nutrient dense, rich spirulina food that has all sorts of healthy stuff. And that stuff takes hours to prepare, to get it fresh and get it raw and then freaking make it taste good. You got to be like a foodie ninja. My wife is not a foodie ninja. Not a little. She's not a white belt ninja.
But you own your house.
Yeah.
You don't rent it. And would you advise people to rent?
People need to own a house, and they shouldn't rent in most circumstances. And I can think of situations where
let's hear a few of both of these. I want to hear your logic.
Well, first of all, why do you want to own a house? Well, because if you never do anything financially fantastic with your life, 40 years later, when you get around to retirement, you're like, okay, let's count up what we have in our 401k and our IRA. Let's count up what we have in savings. Oh, I got some crypto here and there. And then you're going to say, oh, wait, here's this accidental asset that represents the majority of my net worth. Guess what it is?
It's a home.
It's your home, which, by the way, was a liability because it didn't make you money. And if you didn't pay your mortgage, it was going to get taken from you. But you know what? How cool is it? The average person at retirement has a couple $100,000 added to their net worth, and it's called equity in my house. And I think, man, now that you're old and really don't have as much time left, don't you kind of wish you could go back in time and be like, if I bought 4 of those and 4 more and had 200,000 on each one of those, well, I have 5 now, 200, 400, 600, 800,000. That's $1 million. I'm like, but Kris, yeah, you should own real estate.
That's so much debt.
Oh, Now, I don't really like ownership. I avoid it whenever it really makes sense. But debt, I'm in love with debt. I want to make babies with debt. I want to multiply it. I want to grow it. I want to expand that family. I want to adopt every day. I want to have as much debt as I possibly can have.
So, Kris, the way I might put it is what it sounds like you're describing is there's almost like cosmetic ownership versus owning assets. Right? Cosmetic ownership would be owning things just because they're nice or you think you need to have 4 cars or 10 cars or whatever.
So there is the consumer mindset and then there's the investor mindset. Right? When I bought my very first house, my wife and I, at the time, we were renting out this tiny little hole in the ground apartment. It was $400 a month. And literally there was 1 can light in the hallway. I could spread my arms, my wingspan, my freakish 6'4" wingspan and I could touch both sides of the walls of my kitchen. And we decided to get a king size bed because I'm not a small man. Everyone looks at me. They meet me in person like, whoa, Kris, you're so big. I'm 6'3.5".
You're a big guy.
I like a king size bed. But it literally filled up the entire room. There was I think 18 inches of walking around the rest of the space. It was pathetic. We were paying $400 a month for this adorable newlywed hole in the ground built in the 60s. And when we bought our first house, this house was $110,000, but it was worth $150,000, right? I mean, it was just a really good deal, which is on purpose because even though it was a home I was going to live in, I needed it to also be a house, an investment, something that I was thinking about my future. I rented out that basement. It brought in $550 a month. After I refinanced my mortgage was $556 a month. I think I had like a $6 a month mortgage because the basement paid for this 1 bedroom. My wife and I lived upstairs and had 3 bedrooms, newly finished, newly remodeled. It looked nice. And it was right then I'm like, man, this home ownership thing is like a ripoff to my benefit. Like I had worked my butt off to be able to make $28,000 a year. I made in 1 year, I increased my net worth over double that just because I signed my name on a dotted line. Like, why aren't more people thinking about when you buy assets that appreciate and grow and give you tax benefits, even spin off cash flow? How can that not be seen as a superior choice? Everyone is so busy keeping up with the damn Joneses. And I want a new car. I want more stuff. My lease, it's almost 3 years up. This old piece of crap from 3 years old, I'm getting the new model. And everyone is geared towards thinking that way. And there's nothing wrong with nice stuff, but it's the order of things. If you have a nice lifestyle on the outside with all this nice stuff, but it's you having to work your butt off to pay for it, then you're in prison. You're in jail of your own making because you just probably in your 30s and 40s racked up all this debt that now you have to service, and it creates pressure. And now you got to perform at your career. And I say it's backwards. You should be saying, especially when you're young, when you have little money, you team up with the mentor, you get smart, you learn how to buy assets, and you only acquire nice things at the pace that your assets or your investments can pay for them. That's what I did in the beginning. And that's how I was able, 4.5 years later, went from totally poor. When I graduated college, I didn't go get a job. I moved into my 10,000 square foot custom home on the golf course right outside of Provo Canyon in one of the nicest, most desirable neighborhoods. It was brand new. I custom designed the thing literally from the ground up. My wife and I designed every square inch of that place. And that was because we put investing before our own consumer needs.
Well, and it's truly counter-cyclical, Kris, what you did, because most college students are doing what? They're renting an apartment, renting, a basement apartment or something.
Just when you're in college.
When you're in college, you are expected to rent.
Yeah.
But then buy, everybody wants to buy all of their luxury items before they can actually afford them. So you did the inverse.
Yeah. And frankly, I'm doing the inverse in just about every area of my life. People like to own stuff. I don't like to own stuff. There's a lot of people that are feeling more comfortable now, especially millennials. They're like, well, I don't need to own. That's overrated. I like flexibility and mobility. I'm just going to rent. I'm like, well, then you're letting go of one of your biggest assets at retirement. And so, a lot of this thinking to go from a consumer to an investor really means to become counter-cyclical. When everyone's buying, I'm selling. When everyone's selling, I'm buying. In fact, as a general rule of life and money, if you're doing the opposite of what everyone else is, you're probably being smarter. Crypto just tanked. And I just went and bought a whole bunch more. And everyone else is nervous. They're like, how could you do that? What if it keeps going to zero? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like banks, countries are building their entire platforms on the blockchain. This is here to stay. Yeah, it's very volatile, but that's why when the market goes down,
you buy.
Smart buy.
So what do you think is different about, I'd like to pivot this conversation towards the mindset behind it, because I do think there's a mindset shift. Yeah. My first home had a basement apartment because I was imitating your path, and it is definitely a different mindset. I've got so many friends who have told me, man, I wish we could have done what you did, what you guys are doing.
But what were they saying? What were they saying before you made all that money?
But it's too hard.
They were saying it was too hard. But what else were they saying? Sharing walls.
They didn't want to be a landlord.
I don't want to be. It's not convenient.
And what happens if you can't find a tenant? I get that one a lot.
So for just a moment, take a look at the financial walk of life for the average person.
Yeah.
They are going to graduate college with somewhere between a $50,000 and $60,000 a year job. Some will be less and some will be more, but that's your average.
Yeah.
And then you're going to climb the corporate ladder. And if you're a woman, you're going to peak in your late 40s. If you're a man, your earnings is going to peak and it's around 54, so your mid 50s. And if you're a man, your income's going to peak around $90,000. That's kind of your max. Well, if you get in the consumer mindset, here's what consumer mindset means. It means that you have a wish list of things that you want, and now become aware of what's on your list. If you're a consumer, it's like, well, the next time I save up this next chunk of money, I want to do an addition on the house, or I want to remodel this, or I want to put a theater in, or I want to upgrade my car. And so the consumer has a list of things that they want for them. The investor-minded person actually has a very different list. They're like, oh yeah, I'm saving up so I can buy this franchise that's going to kick off $18,000 a month of positive cash flow. And I'm going to take that $18,000 and I can take half of it and get out of my job. And I can take the other half and I'm going to invest it in 3 more franchises, right? They have a plan that you make a financial choice that builds an asset that you can extract cash flow, tax benefits, and value from to do it again. And there's extremes of both of these. Like, I know some people that they just want to keep up with the Joneses. I have friends that are actually named Joneses. Man, these people have a beautiful lifestyle, and he drives a Lamborghini. And well, listen, he made, I think he made like $1 million last month, right? He can have that lifestyle because he did it in the right order. He mastered the game of money, and then he made choices after. So people are doing it, usually opposite. Although you and I have a close friend who is really good at making money, socking it away, investing it, making even more money, and could upgrade his lifestyle,
but won't,
but refuses to, right? And that's, to each their own. We all get to live with the results, the fruit of our choices. And there's something beautiful about that.
This individual you're talking about, better to do it in that order than the opposite, to live outside your means for a lifestyle you can't afford. This is an individual that
can penny pinch and actually be really happy. There's a lot of frugal people I know that are miserable. Yeah. And they're thinking, oh, we could have taken that trip. We could have had that vacation. Oh, we could have lived in a nicer neighborhood. We could have given our kids a better schooling. Oh, we could have.
And they're doing it out of fear almost.
And what happens is that scarcity mindset that's rooted in fear, there is a cost to delaying gratification for the wrong reason, or picking up a negative energy, that negative sentiment along the way. Because with every passing decade, you will become more crotchety. You'll become more nasty. You'll become ultimately an unbearable human being that no one wants to spend time around, because you have this ultra cynical view of the world. So you got to watch out for that crap. I'd rather be on the side that says, hey, I'm going to invest. And by the way, you know why people don't really invest? Your friend said, oh, it's riskier. I don't want to be a landlord. But you know what the real reason is? There's a fear of failure.
Yeah.
It's risk. There's higher risk. Everything that I'm saying sounds riskier. But the weird thing is, not to me. Like there's people who are like, oh, geez, Kris, you want to do that real estate or that business because that really high ROI? High ROI must mean really high risk. And I'm like, bruh, you got your money sitting in a 401k, 30-year average at 6%. I've done the math on your income and what you want at retirement. I got news for you. You're going to be missing $1.6 million when you're 65 years old. Looks like you're so conservative to a fault that you're actually guaranteed to fail. Tell me how that isn't a greater risk than me having a shot when you got none.
This is actually a perfect seg into the next thing I wanted to talk about, Kris, because I think this actually comes right back to the conversation of ownership. And it's ownership of your life. Should someone rent or own their life?
There was a moment when I woke up. When I was a kid growing up, my dad tried to get me in sports, and I would play soccer and I'd do basketball. And for whatever reason, I couldn't really connect. I was a little bit turned off because I had 3 older brothers that were highly competitive, and because they were older than me and just bigger, I just always felt like they were beating up on me a little bit. So I couldn't quite catch it. It just really wasn't my thing. I liked weightlifting. I liked track and field. I liked kind of individual sports, not so much the team thing. Did a lot of basketball and football on my 5 acres that I grew up on in the woods with my brothers. My dad poured a little basketball court. We played some tennis and pickleball. My dad was trying hard to find something for me because I wasn't excelling in school. I wasn't getting good grades. And it's just like I wasn't there. And if I reflect on my earlier childhood, I felt like a robot. I felt like I really wasn't thinking my own thoughts. I felt like I was just trying to do what everyone else wanted. So my dad would just beat down and just like, Kris, you got to get good grades. I need you to get good grades. This is your future. When I was in school, it wasn't like I didn't try harder, but after I tried what I thought as a robot was my best effort, dude, my grades sucked. They were all over the place. And in some things I was really deficient. Other things, a couple of things I did okay. But you look at my scorecard, you're like, yes, this kid is destined for
mediocrity.
Less than average.
Yeah.
Less than average. And then I remember my dad, it was almost like he had given up on me a little bit because he was reaching out. He wanted to connect with me. He's a German immigrant and moved to America and met my mom and has this big old crazy 9-kid family. I'm number 4. And my dad was just trying to help me find my thing. And I think good parents do that. One day my dad called me into his office. I was 15 years old and he said, son, there's this thing called a paper route. And I'm like, huh? Like, you're in junior high now. There's that paper shack right next to there. You go there right after school at 3:30. The shack manager will give you 30 papers. You put them in this bag. You sling them over your shoulder. You get on your bike and you do this. And I'm thinking, but that looks like miles. And we're in Washington. This is a very hilly terrain. I'm like, and I was chubby, by the way. Like I was so disconnected to everything. I felt like I was kind of the depressed, made fun of kid that didn't really get along with people and yet wanted to, but just didn't quite. I felt like I lacked some of the social skills or even just motivation. I just didn't even feel like it. I just felt like a robot. I felt like life was just going by. If you ever watched that movie, Click, with Adam Sandler, and he gets this universal remote that can fast forward and rewind his life, the remote breaks. And as he gets going on fast forward and kind of checks in on his life into the future, there's this one dinner scene where he's having spaghetti. And because he's robotic, he's just kind of like stuffing spaghetti in his mouth and it's falling in his lap and he's kind of slurring his language. And I connected with that part of the movie because I was like, that's what my first 15 years felt like ever since I could walk and talk. Because I didn't feel like I was having my own thoughts. I didn't feel like I was breathing my own air. I was just in the background doing whatever I was told. So my dad gets me this paper out and I'm just like, something zinged me. I'm like, I felt a little spark inside. My dad said, well, at the end of the month, you deliver these papers, these addresses, you get to, go collect the money, you get to keep half of it, give the other half to Seattle Times. So I said, okay, let's do this. The first time I got on my bike, it took me 2 hours to find every address. and to just learn how to read the maps and to deliver 30 stupid little papers. By the end of the week, I started to memorize my routes and get things down. 2 months later, I hit my growth spurt. I shoot up, get real tall. I get faster on my bike. I get competitive on my bike. Those hills that were so hard to conquer started putting some muscle on those quads and thighs. And after the third month, I was given an opportunity to pick up another route next door. And then in the fourth month, there was another one next door, huge. I got to the point where I had like 90 papers. And by the way, carrying 90 papers, 45 on each side is a weight. It is a thing. And so it was getting harder and the routes were getting longer, but there was something I was loving about it. And I started timing myself. How fast can I actually tear it up? And I saved up my money and I got a new bike. And then they invited me to be shack manager. Here's an extra $100 a month, lay out the papers for the other boys. And 6 months later, I had probably growth spurt of 6 inches. I had gotten real lean. All my chubbies and belly was gone. Muscles had replaced them. And I was just finishing the second of 3 routes going in. I was making a land speed record. I was 19 minutes in. I had tracked several miles. I delivered all these papers. And I was going from one neighborhood into the next. And all of a sudden, my bike skids out from underneath me. And I catch myself with my foot. And there's gravel flying everywhere. And I'm breathing hard. And I breathe in. And it was like I took my first real breath of life. I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in charge of my life. And I looked down, I saw my muscles thumping on my legs. And I'm like, I put these on. And all of a sudden I became aware that I was a good looking kid. And I'm like, I feel good about who I am. And I looked at all the paper I delivered and I was thinking about the money that was in my bank account. And this entrepreneur was waking up and I'm like, I can freaking have it all. I can manifest everything that I want. I can become anything that I want. That was the moment that changed everything for me. After that, I got near straight A's. There were several subjects that I really naturally struggled at. Didn't matter. I doubled down, I tripled down. I just learned with effort, you can make up the difference. And it became the mantra of my life that I can have anything I want. And all of a sudden I went from being the dumbest kid to a kid that said, even if this is hard, I'm going to figure it out. So that was a moment that changed everything for me. And I took ownership of my life. That's when I became the owner of my surroundings. That's when I started realizing that I can manifest a destiny of my choice. And I started making plans. I started figuring out the kind of life I wanted to live. I started realizing, okay, when I grow up, I'm going to make so much money. I can take care of my mom and dad because they're always fighting, struggling about money. And I started deciding who I wanted to be when I grew up. I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I decided I want to help people, decided a whole bunch of other things that never happened, but they led me to my next. And so it was that moment for me. There's so many people I meet today, Carson, that they just don't have that light in their eyes, like they haven't woken up yet. They're just zombies, sleepwalkers. And you almost wave your hand in front of them and say, hello, tap their forehead, hello. When are you going to come out of that cocoon?
You know, I love that story, Kris. It's powerful.
Never shared that before.
Yeah. Like that's new.
Yeah.
The spark of entrepreneurship just came alive in you and you had a chance to.
Well, dude, what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is the ultimate ownership of everyone. It's like, I don't need a boss. I don't need the government. I don't need this handout. I don't need this program. I don't need anything. It's like, I can become a pillar in my community to provide for me and my family. And then if I get good at this, I can provide for others. And that was always the drive, but it is the extreme version of ownership. And by the way, you can do this working for someone else. It's called intrapreneurship. It's where you're actually aligning yourself with a company whose dreams, vision, and mission you feel strongly that you're supposed to help birth in the world. And you can find just as much joy and pleasure, financial reward doing that if you're real smart about it. And there's a way for all of us to find real ownership in our life. But here's what I see. Here's what happens when you don't take ownership of your life. Oh yeah, my marriage is really struggling right now. Oh my gosh, shut the heck up. Are you kidding me? If your marriage is struggling, let me guess, you're also pointing the fingers and blaming and pointing out the things that you don't like that aren't really working for you. Grow up. You chose, when you chose that woman, if it's a woman, you chose everything about that person. And you chose everything that you knew, everything you thought you knew, but more importantly, you chose everything you didn't know. You chose everything. And the moment we become a victim is when we stop taking ownership. That's what victimhood is. It's saying, well, I'm accountable for these things, but not those things. Oh my gosh, this person came into my life and they were so mean to me. Great. Why are they in your life? Did you put them there? Did you create a relationship with them? Did you choose to work at a company where they're sharing the cubicle next to you? Like, if you can't take ownership for your part of the things that aren't working in your life, you'll always be a victim. And by the way, there's no worse words I think that anyone would like to be called in. What? Kris, are you saying that if there's a part of my life I don't like? Kris, if you're saying that if there's something bad happening, are you saying that I need to take ownership for that? Yeah, I am.
Because you made every choice to get you there.
You made every choice to get you there. Well, Kris, what about that perfect stranger that I did not know that came up to me and did that thing? They molested me. Why were you walking on that street at that time of day? Why were you not better prepared in your ability to handle yourself or take care of yourself? By the way, it doesn't mean that it's your fault.
Right.
But until you take ownership, which is one of the hardest things to look at, you can't make things better. But what victimhood will do is rob you years and sometimes decades, or worse, an entire life. And that's too expensive. Because as far as I know, you only got one.
So I think another word we can swap out for ownership is responsibility. And when my friends looked at, me buying homes with basement apartments and landlording and risk, what they were really saying is, I don't want that responsibility. Because if there is a risk, like, hey, you can't find a tenant. If you take ownership, you say, okay, I know exactly what I have to do. I'll go find a tenant. I think you look at risk different, Kris, because you know in any given situation with any given challenge, who's going to show up to create the solution?
Well, at some point we have to get a crystal ball and we got to look into the future. You see, the blessing that I had when I was a young, dumb college kid in my early 20s, I worked at this telemarketing company, and all day long I'm talking to these 55, 65-year-olds. And these people all shared something in common. They had been to college, they had gotten higher education, they had followed society's game plan. They had been 401k'ing, IRAing, and house payer offering. They had been doing everything society said you were supposed to do. And I now got a chance to look in on where they're at with their life. And the general feeling I got financially from them was panic. Panic because guess what? They didn't have enough money. And why didn't they have enough money? Because they followed society's game plan. So you back up 30 years like, oh, I don't want that responsibility. You better listen right now. If you can't do the math to know exactly how you want to be, where you want to be financially at whatever age, when you get there, that's on you. That is a lack of ownership. That is trusting in a system that is not designed to help you be financially free. It's designed to help you live check to check and maybe set a little bit of money aside. And if you add up 40 years of a little bit money set aside, it is not enough. And so I started realizing, wait a second, full ownership of my life means that I can't even, now listen to my language here, I can't even trust the biggest institutions on this planet. Yeah, because they're not there to give you a have-it-all life. They're there to sustain life. And most of that sustaining comes from a scarce-based, fear-based energy that is about having enough. And so, Jude, if you want to run your mouth on me and shoot off and say, oh yeah, I don't want that responsibility, then you better be the same person at 65-year-old that says, oh, dude, I'm totally good that I only have $50,000, $150,000 in my name. There's Walmart. This was my plan the whole time. I'm going to work at Walmart for the next 15. Dude, if that's you, if that's really your plan, you own it, then kudos to you. Hopefully you're finding a way to enjoy every step of your life as max you can. But that is not what I find. What I really find to have happen is that people panic and say, I wish I knew. I wish someone had told me. Well, guess what? I'm telling you now.
Pause.
I'm trying to create these stories for dramatic moments so we can have these 4 to 6 minute reels.
Kris, these are really good. Okay, how do we want to lead this out?
I think you should recommend, do you have any books on ownership that you recommend?
Oh, perfect. So Kris, do you have any resources, books, things people can take to learn more about ownership and taking ownership of their life?
So first and foremost, there are so many amazing, incredible human beings that have written books about this topic. Most recent was a book called Extreme Ownership. And that book is written by 2 Navy SEALs that talk about their time overseas and what it was like during war, when life and death was on the line. We get to bitch and whine and moan about things like, oh, so-and-so, you're getting a divorce, because I'm like, someone's life was maybe not on the line in that situation, although that's a really hard, heavy lift you had to go through. But taking a chance to learn from people whose choices led to life or death, that book is amazing. I believe that in entirety, it does an incredible job outlining what ownership actually looks like, and will take you through some of the hardest scenarios where you'd say, oh, certainly you have an out, you have a hall pass, you don't have to take ownership, and you'll be wrong. The other book on a total different spectrum, let's call it an emotional spectrum, is a book by Katie Byron called Loving What Is. This is a beautiful book that causes you to challenge your perception of reality, because we develop these belief systems about what people can and can't do to us, and what's right and what's fair and what's unfair. Have you ever heard that? It's not fair. It's not fair. Well, this book tackles one woman's extreme life experience where she was taken to almost insane asylum levels, and what she learned as she pulled herself out of that came a philosophy that I don't entirely agree with, but I mostly agree with. And what it does is it just causes you to start with this question in life. Is it true? Because we say a lot of bullshit. We say a lot of things that aren't true. We say a lot of things that don't make sense. It's like, so-and-so shouldn't have done that to me. Is that true? So-and-so shouldn't treat me that way. Is that true? That shouldn't work this way. Is that true? And when you ask that question, is it true? Your ego mind says, well, of course it is. I decided that. But remember, we don't operate in reality. We operate in our perception of reality, which frankly is often very, very, very quite far off the mark from what reality is. The second question of 4 in this brilliant book says, can you absolutely know without a shadow of a doubt, 100%, that it's actually, indeed, in fact, true? And all of a sudden, when you go from is it true to can you absolutely 100% know without a shadow of a doubt that it's true? A yes on the second question oddly turns into a no. We hate that question being asked in the absolute form. So just right there, the breakthrough begins, because you start realizing, oh my gosh, my perception of reality is based on a lot of ideas that I hold as truth, but really they're actually beliefs, and some of them are lies. They're limiting. They're not formed in reality. And they're really skewing my perception, and they're giving me this often at times delusional interpretation of what is, which means that often at the end of the day, when you don't believe that you're wrong or at fault, you actually are. The book helps you learn when you are, when you're not. I think it's a beautiful book ultimately about ownership. It's about learning how to, through inquiry, question your assumptions about life, to start figuring out which ones are right and which ones are wrong. And when I talk about that moment of waking up, I think that once you really wake up, there's a natural desire to want to litmus test all the things that you thought were true. And as I've gone through, like I had all these beliefs about my body before I lost all that weight and put on a muscular frame, which I love because I get to eat several extra 1,000 calories a day without consequence. My muscles burn that. I enjoy this body. I would have never gotten my temple to this state, this body, unless I had questioned ideas that I held as true, which was I've got bad genes, diabetes are in my genes, I have a sugar tooth, I can't, control myself around food, my body needs more of this or that, I'm not capable of doing that, it's hard to go to the gym. All this BS that so many of us live with, that if you take those ideas and you believe they're true, then you'll bias it. You'll look for information and experiences that confirm the truth. And that confirmation bias will literally make the worst lie true, even though that's only in your perception, not in reality. At some point, we have to wake up. We have to realize that a lot of the assumptions that we live our life by, especially the beliefs that we hold, many of them are limiting. And so they don't allow us to see accurately. They don't actually allow us to perceive what's real. And so I think that's, how can you be accountable and how can you become the ultimate owner of your life unless you start seeing life as it truly is instead of how you've been perceiving it? A couple good books.
Kris, there's one book that you left off that list.
I think I left a lot.
Yeah, but there's one in particular that I think should be mentioned. It's called Limitless. Are you familiar with it?
Well, I wrote that book.
Yeah,
yes,
you wrote that one.
No, I do think that is the definitive book on how you rewrite your belief system consciously. I document in that book the top 10,000 beliefs that make up reality. And then I help isolate the ones that are not serving in your health, in your wealth, in your relationships, and how you feel with your personal identity. And then I help you shift out of those so that you can perform, that you can create a perception that really is rooted in reality. And that book is really a decade-long work in my life, and it'll probably remain to my dying day the most important thing that I ever write about, but talk the least about.
That's actually what I was going to say. Is a lot of people look at you as the real estate guy, the money guy, the finance guy, but there's this whole other component of how you really change lives that has to do with.
Yeah, but let me ask you, what is money? What is your money? What is all of your success if you lose the most important relationship, which might be a loved one or a child or yourself? What is money if you lose your health? There's a point at which we'll trade everything to get a little more health back. And so really, how can you consider yourself successful unless you have it all? You have to be every day striving for your health improvements, your relationship improvements, and your financial improvements while maintaining or developing an even greater identity of self that is strong and true and not founded in ego. And there's a roadmap there that you need if you want to have it all. So yeah, there are a lot of people that come and listen and watch because of the whole money, but that's the beginning of a journey, not the end.
Okay, I'm getting this URL because I want to be. People can get this Limitless book for free.
Yep.
Let me pull this up. Okay, it's kriskrohn.com/Limitless free book. You can go get a copy of that book, and we don't talk too much about it, and yet it is one of the most powerful things I've read.
Pearls Before Swine.
Yeah.
I save that book for a sincere truth seeker that says, I'm ready to have my life transformed entirely from start to finish. And I would always pair that with, come to one of my live events.
Yeah.
You know, my 4-day live events are so transformational that by the end of the first day, everyone had an experience that they weren't expecting, and they all walk away saying that was one of the most important events of my life. And we're only getting started by the end of day one. And so the book is about the real estate between your two ears. In fact, I was with Emmitt Smith. You remember Emmitt Smith from the Cowboys, 3-time Super Bowl champion. Yep. He was. I was in a private mastermind. He was being interviewed, and someone asked the question, "What's the difference between an amateur athlete and a pro athlete?" Right? Are they faster? Are they stronger? Can they do more pull-ups? Like what's the difference? He says, honestly, the difference between an amateur and a pro, it's what's between the ears. It's all mindset at that point. So anyone that is truly on a journey of having it all will eventually need to take a strong dive into the psychology of human, understanding how we're built, understanding how our mind develops. And I have endless fascination for it because if you can break down the social constructs, the thought processes, and how we as humans think, work, and operate, which is what the book Limitless does, then you can manipulate yourself to become your highest and best self. Until then, if you don't understand how this machine works, then you're going to be lagging.
So they can get Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, Limitless that you wrote, and then come out to one of our events. kriskrohn.com/events will take you to whatever event is coming up next. We do them often, trainings and events.
And take extreme ownership of your life like we've talked about today. And financially, if you're not using it enough to enjoy it, delete it and save the money and then spend it on renting or creating experience or things that actually matter. If you're not using your social streaming accounts, dude, save the extra $7 a month. If you're not using that cargo trailer anymore and it'd be cheaper just to rent it, then sell that and harvest back $8,000. If you're not using that other vehicle, if it's time to downsize, and it's not about living off of less, it's about you being able to fully express who you are with what you have. And often ownership is not required to have that. So save yourself the money, invest the difference, and become a lot more successful.